and welcome again to this third installment of a short trust series that Genix Cyber brings to you, where we talk about important cybersecurity topics. This topic is going to deal with identity security, and let's try to make it as entertaining as possible. And as always, would request your feedback, comments, and any additions that you would like to make to whatever you hear from me today. With that said, let's get started.
Despite significant advancements, why is identity security still a top concern?
Well, identity security has to be a top concern as far as cybersecurity goes. And essentially, what is a security breach all about? It's about an identity gaining unauthorized uh, access to a data element and doing, mischievous activities, performing mischievous activities on that data set or in an environment. But for the first point of entry for any hacker or bad actor to invoke a breach would be getting access to a set of credentials within that organization. Now, there's a number of ways that that can be done, and without going into the those details of what types of credential breaches do we see these days. Let's dive into the fact that, okay, why then just to expand on the statement I made that identity is of core importance for any breach to take place, and you lose access to your credentials, then you're done with. Uh, and, uh, and if you see the increasing advent of for different types of identities today. So essentially, earlier it was workforce identities, then came your external identities or third party identities, the B2Cs of the world. You also have your B2Bs as well, where you have your vendors, partners, whoever that are accessing your systems. And how do you keep track of those accesses of someone leaving that organization still having access to you or whoever has access to that third party organization, right? I mean, if a breach in that organization could very well mean a breach in your systems too. So, with the expanse of the realm of or the perimeter of how far an identity can reach, as well as the type of identity, right? It's no more just human or system accounts or shared accounts, but it's also machine identities. Now, if you look at the whole of AI equation that is coming to fore very quickly, right? If you consider AI, so what kind of an identity identifier would an AI platform have, and how do you track what the activities does the AI platform perform within your environment or within itself? For that simple reason, would you qualify? As far as I'm concerned, I see the AI, an AI application agent or what have you, be nothing else but obviously similar to a human identity, right? I mean, it's not human as such, but it is going to be capable in days to come to perform every action that a human could perform. So the same set of policies, very basically and foundationally, that apply to your human identities or system identities should also apply to AI. Now, if you don't agree with that statement, then feel free to write it in the comment section or when this video gets posted. But that becomes of prime importance, right? To simplify, how do you manage identities and credentials uh, for AI-driven actions? Uh, Now, if you consider them to be human identities, then the same set of entitlements, roles, rules, and the logic that you have and the policies as well, even in the enterprise world, the HR policies, what have you, right? Should apply to them, and that becomes significant when, as an authoritative source of those identities. Who knows? Tomorrow, an AI agent would need to be registered in the system, some source of authority, like an HR or a beehive for contractors, where you say, okay, now this is an identified persona that can now do things to my environment. So, with all of this realm expanding and expanding so fast, how do you keep track of everything that's taking part in your universe of technologies or information technologies, cyber technologies, or call it what one of these analyst firms want to call it tomorrow? Huh. But that's by identifying a credential or an identifier for that matter for each of those that expanded universe, right? Devices, people, non-human, human, system accounts. So essentially, that's the number one reason that credentials will not go out of date, or identity management will not go out of date, and the access that they perform will not go out of date.
Beyond the limitations, what are some specific unmet needs in IAM?
Well, that's, I mean, if you ask me, that's a no-brainer sort of a question, right? I mean, everyone who has been involved with identity on and access management from day zero or from the times or genesis of IAM, right? You would know that the importance of identity is not just to track an individual or a non-human in today's world as to what actions they are performing, but where they are performing it as well. Now, the where of where they're performing it is essentially applications, devices, or what have you. So then that brings us to the question of expanding the IAM universe to touch each and every component and area of your organization to track the actions being performed by that identity. Now, that brings us to the problem statement, which is anyone in the identity world would know what I'm going to say next is application or device or end system onboarding. That's where the wallet opens up and the cash starts flowing out. The cost of kind of expanding the IAM universe to number of applications is where most of the cost and the services costs are allocated to, right? A lot of kind of enhancements and have been made in that area. A lot of good product companies or identity vendors have come out with ways and means of automating to a large extent app onboarding, right? But it's still not all the way there because every application is built differently, some custom, some new in the market, so you don't really know what set of parameters it requires to then create an account or an entitlement within that application or device. So that's why it's a costly affair, and it's as far as we have evolved as identity technologies to mitigate that problem area, the application growth has been faster than how far the identity industry has grown to adapt. So every application will have unique ways and means to do their things. Entitlements will differ, roles would differ, personas would differ in the application. So that advanced application governance realm. One of the vendors does all of that very well, and we'll come to the next point, and they are leaders, and there's obviously a new breed of technologies also coming up, doing some of that very well, where expansion, introduction of AI into some of this understanding of roles and entitlements becomes critical for app onboarding. But that, in my mind, is the most costly integration, maintenance, support affair with an identity, and that creates that's been a historical challenge, and the industry is coped well so far. But there is a lot more we can do.
You mentioned a central repository for entitlements. Is this a potential game changer for IAM?
Business to application mapping of roles entitlements has always been another concern. But that, and again, going back to the answer I gave to the second question, right? Building a standard around entitlements, you can certainly build a standard around for industry what are business application roles and entitlements, right? From an organization point of view. But from an application point of view, it's hard to cap a standard where each application that services that industry at all, or because most of the applications are kind of cross industry, right? Becomes a challenge. Again, these are my opinions, and if anyone wants to disagree, please feel free to write your kind of understanding within the comment section. But so it becomes a conversation between you and ourselves, which is what we are looking for. But again, going back to the point, it, I mean, there's always been a case in point where for every organization you do business roles to application roles mapping, right? And some level of entitlements. Now, some of the bigger, larger systems or applications where the entitlement repository and roles have not changed much, or when they change, it is a way to understand, export them, and bring it to a centralized repository for performing that certification or attestation, or regular checks of activities performed by those entitlements. But and I did touch on this point in the last question also, where I was talking about advanced application governance. That was more to do with these deep coarse grain entitlements within applications, right? So the problem again is the same. The number of applications and the problems those applications address would require for different roles and entitlements built for that application specifically. Now, can you then create a boundary, a standard boundary around all of those applications catering different use cases, different problem statements for different industry types, and come up with a central application specific role and entitlement framework? I don't think that's a possibility until you do come up with the framework first, and then the applications start adopting to it. Then what happens to the legacy applications? We are trying for in the AI world. What we are trying to do is we are trying to do that from a policy point of view, where a number of regulations, industry specific or best practices that are unanimous in nature. How do those adapt to different specific so how can we come up with a standard kit bag of controls that can then be mapped back to each industry specific control? Similar mechanisms should can probably be thought of in terms of business to application role mapping. But will the line ever disappear between the business application and application roles? I don't believe it would. So, building that centralized entitlement repository, while you can do it for an organization, but that be made reusable? There's a lot to be done to reach that goal. Until we first start with an organization that puts forth some sort of a foundational business to application type entitlement mapping or role mapping, uh, um, it would be difficult for applications coming in the future to not have that standard.
What are the key trends in identity access management?
The key trend, if you ask every second person at the Gartner summit that just concluded, would, in my mind, be the converged. So the identity industry itself has grown, right? I think it's an industry in itself. While it is part of cybersecurity, but like cybersecurity, everything is else is on one side. Identity security or identity industry is on the other. That's because the way it's grown and the number of functions that have grown. Talking about functions, I mean, identity management is no more just about deep provisioning, and SSO or web access management, as it used to be in early 2000s, right? It's now grown to be privileged access management, third party access governance and management, customer identity and access management, and more, right? And there are also talks about how, I mean, a lot of people are probably already thinking in those terms, and there are probably application suites out there that use a certificate and manage that as an identity and its identity life cycle. But so all of this is further going to be expanding, right, into different realms or sub realms for these areas that I mentioned within that are important within IAM. So it becomes prime that these concepts or modules or however you want to look at it or functions, right, aren't built as separate products. You need to build an identity foundation. There are a couple of products today in the market, some very good technologies, um, and that we have I have been working with for I have been working with for years, and Genix in specific has identified to work with to build a converged single code base platform that can do all of these activities built on an enterprise identity, centralized identity repository, database, directory, however you want to look at it, right? So it becomes primarily important that you build that foundation of identities and then build all of these different segments as functions that that identity can perform, or different types of identities for that matter, right? So in like going back to question one, I think where I mentioned, historically there used to be employees, contractors, right? They became external identities. Um, but now we are far more than that. So those each identity persona or type of persona has a different level of interaction with an organization's infrastructure. So, but the foundational activities of how that persona is created, how that past persona needs to be tracked, how that persona can be removed or attested or certified, or n number of core things that the identity industry exists to perform are consistent. So you need to think in terms of convergence, not integrated, converged, not integrated, framework or a platform where you have this identity, centralized identity repository or persona repository, where then all of these functions, be it privilege, be it third party, be it whatever it expands to tomorrow, are performed out of. You think an AI identity that is allocated to an AI agent or an application will not need to be attested? It will. Will it not need to be called out if it accesses privileged data or performs privileged actions? It should. So foundational, setup is very important. Now, there are a lot of good vendors that have in the past had one type of technology or another, be it identity provisioning or access, have gone ahead and bought a number of other types of technology firms to create this concept of them also being converged. But at the end of the day, they are all separate installs, right? And you do need a significant amount of services effort to kind of make them look converged. Now, some have gone ahead and layered a dashboard sort of thing on top of all these multiple technologies to give that look and feel of a converged platform. But end of the day, the back end still needs to be integrated. So I think number one priority in my mind would be this converged ways and means of thinking. We at Genex have come up with a converged a product, a single code based product for everything cyber, not identity. Like I said, I consider identity as a unique and a fundamentally strong industry in itself. Everything cyber, using the same concepts of a foundational converged universe where every cyber action can be performed as a plug into that universe, and we've done that without the use of any third-party technology. It's all inbuilt. Like I said, single code base. You don't need additional services help to kind of integrate different components. That's where the identity industry needs to get to. There are some set of very good vendors out there that think like that have developed like that, and I think that's where you should look at.
What are the biggest challenges when it comes to managing and analyzing identity data?
Managing and analyzing, uh, don't ask the design team not to take anything before this point, right? Let me start the response again. Managing and analyzing identity data. That's a significant. That's a loaded question in my mind because it applies to both as an input into your identity as an output as well to through what that identity accesses, right? Now you can analyze how an identity should be created. Again, that business to application role mapping. What are the birthright applications they get access to? What is does the identity look like? What are the name value attribute pairs that it should consist of? What does a persona look like? How should you track activity within the persona, or you should have a persona drive the activity? Some of the EU user behavior analytics tool kind of work on the latter, right, aspect of what I just said. But that's from the creation of the identity itself, right? Obviously, you have to do some analysis and everything to understand, okay, what the persona looks like, and for each type of identity, right? And what is the function that they're going to solve. Now, on the more critical part side of things is where you do analyze the usage of the identity and its actions around across the data equation to understand anomalies, threats, or a potential attack. That those analytics are of the most serious kind, and identity systems are not yet, I believe. I mean, there was a lot of talk within Gartner to and amongst other analysts as well to draw a full circle around all of this, right? Where and the identity activity, be it anomalous or vulnerable, uh, can cause a threat, is causing a threat, or is responsible for an attack, right? Tracking that. So there comes the rest of the cyber industry and the identity industry then converging. That's essentially what, with Argus, Genix Cyber is trying to do. We have built the universe that does everything cyber except for identity. We are integrating with some core identity providers to give it the identity side of things and the identity specific data that then, when combined with the cyber specific data, can give us that threat based analysis of real time breaches taking place, of real time attack surface, if you would, and vulnerabilities and gaps in thereof, right? So that should be how the next generation of identity based threat management, or ITDR, right, as people look at it. But I think this whole purpose should go beyond what ITDR is limited to perform today, right? And the ways and means of how it is supposed to perform today. Again, you would end up integrating a number of tools on the threat spectrum as well as the identity and access spectrum to come to an equation. When you look at Genix and Argus specifically, it is 1 plus 1 equals 2, right? It is not 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals to whatever number that comes to, right? The answer should still be a Boolean. Is this a thread, not a thread? Am I being breached? Yes or no? Can I be breached? Yes or no? And that's the purpose that the industry should look to come to solving. I believe that should address that question about the data analytics or identity data analysis based on identity data, just in a very simplistic way, right? Again, look at it from a point of view of input into the identity system, that data, identity specific data to form a persona, and then how the persona reacts within an organization's infrastructure to be able to identify threats and attacks happening in real time when combined with other detection and response technologies out there. Thank you.